So today I'm going to be working on my grandpa's old reel, long since passed away, which is a Shakespeare Wondercast number 1771, Model EB. And on Shakespeare's, this model with the two letters indicate the year. And so you can look up online for Shakespeare model codes. And you can determine the EB stands for the year 1969. And it would retain that, so it may have been, so basically the EB means that this very model, this exact model, was first produced in 1969, even though production may have gone a number of years. So long as there were no changes to the engineering, it would remain the Model EB. So it doesn't verify that this particular reel was made in 1969, just means that that model first began in 1969. So I went through this reel once before I really had a lot of experience with servicing reels, and I wasn't really happy with how it was working. I can't remember exactly what the issue was. It's probably the drag. And then, so I had it all together and it was working reasonably. Had it all together, and then I got a really neat Fluger reel, which was purchased by Shakespeare, and it was missing the spring that keeps the spinner head open, and I stole the spring off of this one temporarily to get the Fluger working. And the Fluger that I used it on is this one here, a Fluger 530, which I have the rod for, which was basically a kid's outfit. You don't see them very often, kind of hard to come by. I got the rod first, and then I managed to find the reel, took a chance on it on an online auction, and basically the only thing that was wrong with it was missing that little spring. And figured I'd come across another one of these and swipe a spring out of it. Well, the other day that came to fruition. This one's definitely farm fresh, and it's one that I don't feel too badly about sacrificing to save my grandpa's reel. You can see that there's damage to the cover here. There's a broken piece of the foot. I think that's the wrong handle nut on there. The cover, in addition to that damage, is beat up and scratched up, and the body is not great. There's some corrosion and bubbling of the paint, but the handle's a little better than mine. Mine had been bent and had to be straightened, and there's some gashes on the knob, and the knob's loose and so on. So you want to keep as many parts as original to the reel as possible when it's a situation like it was your grandfather's or your dad's or something like that. For nostalgia purposes, you want to kind of keep it as much the same as possible. But I have no qualms with replacing the handle with a better handle, and of course any interior parts that need to be changed. So the way I'm going to do this is I'm going to do this sort of like a service video. I'm going to pull this one all apart, and we'll see how it's put together. And then I'm going to re-examine this one and decide which parts, if any. I know the little spring's going to come out of this one into here, but we'll see which parts, if any, or any other parts might need to come out. But I do notice there's a difference in the color of gold on the cap. I don't know if part of that is sun fading, or maybe somebody tried to spray paint one of these. I doubt it. I don't know what the cause of the difference in color there is. My grandpa probably wasn't an avid fisherman. He probably purchased this reel. He had a number of them in his garage, lived on a lake for a good portion of his adult years, and probably had a number of rods and reels around just for occasional fishing, and then maybe when the grandkids or kids came over. But this reel has a particularly funny story associated with it. I was probably 12 or so years old, 11 or 12 years old, and my grandpa and my dad and I decided to go fishing in a gosh, I'm not even sure if it was a 10-foot long John boat. It might have been an 8-foot long John boat. And I remember the water level came right almost up to the gunnel. And so we're all three fishing in there, bobber fishing. And my grandpa had this huge orange and yellow round bobber on there. And he went to cast, and he slapped that bobber down in the water right in front of us, splashed all of us with that gigantic bobber. Must have not released the button or forgot to push the button or something. And I think deep down inside I knew what I was saying when I responded like this. I said, "Here, Grandpa, I'll cast it for you." Now, my grandpa was when he was working, was a police officer and a detective. And even to just an average fishing, avocational fisherman, one thing you don't say to an adult is, "Here, I'll do it for you." And it made my grandpa particularly mad. And he says, "No, I'll show you some casting that'll grow some hair on your chest." And so he cocked way back on that rod and was going to cast it a country mile. And I kid you not, he had a brand new derby style hat on, and the hook caught the back of his hat, and he cast it in the water. And of course we all started to laugh, but he wasn't laughing. He was frantic because he just bought that new hat. And he's trying to wind it in. It's still hooked, and it's coming in like a 9-pound bluegill, rod bent over. He finally gets it to the boat. He's panicked, and he gets it to the boat. And at that point, he's happy about it. Now he's going to try to make it like it's funny. And so he unhooks the hat and slaps it on his head, soaking wet, and goes, "There, I told you I'd grow some hair on your chest." So let's go ahead and start taking the donor reel apart and seeing what it looks like in there. Okay, so we'll start off by taking off the cover, which twists counterclockwise a bit and then comes off. And you can see that's pretty farm fresh. There's a lot of lake scum in there. There's some spider nests in there, so on. So we'll put that in the parts tray. And let's see here, take off this spinner head. So there's a retaining nut, and then there's some kind of a lock type washer. And a bunch of old nasty grease in there, which we can get the most of off there now. Put that in the parts bin. Okay, it just slides off. That's probably the thing that I need to get my grandpa's to work. Yep, I think that's the little doohickey that allows the spinner head to stay out when you push the button. Okay, so that's not bad in there, and it's not even really that dry. Now we'll take off the handle. And I'm going to pull this line off of this spool. And just like that, the line's off the spool. You can see a lot of lake grime on there. You want to get all that off in the cleaning process because that can affect the casting and so on. Okay, I'll get the handle off, put that in the parts, and unscrew the star drag adjuster. And now we can start removing the side plate. And there's some bugs in there. And a lot of hard grease and debris. I'm going to take off the side plate of my grandpa's. Again, this should be pretty clean inside because I've been in it. Might switch out some of these boogered up screws from the old one as well. And you can see that one's nice and clean inside. We're just going to compare and make sure that I got that, my grandpa's reel, put together correctly with regard to those drag washers especially. And then this one there wasn't any, the anti-reverse wasn't working. I'm guessing it's just because that pawl is stuck. We'll get out of there. Maybe go through this way. Put that in the parts container. And will that winkle out of there? Yep, it will, I think, without having to take all that apart, I assume. Oh, that's really greasy and nasty. And then we should be able to push out the, oh, we got a little washer there. These washers on that crank handle, the concave side goes outward. There isn't much of a concave side left on that one. Now we should be able to push that main gear out of there. And there is a spring there. And yeah, that anti-reverse pawl there, right there, is really sticky, so that's why that wasn't working. That needs to be freed up. And then this spring, that spring, the tip of that spring, I believe goes right over that slot in the pawl there. Alright, so this ought to push out of there. And we should have, there's a drag washer there, and then there should be one on the other side as well. And these are, that one's not too greasy, the other one's pretty greasy. That's a big thick one. And so that goes back on there with the sort of the teeth facing clockwise. What a greasy reel. Somebody's been back in here to grease it. Maybe this was a well-used reel. Somebody, that's not factory grease. But other than that, it's pretty clean in there, and that pretty much takes care of the disassembly of this rather simple reel. So I'm going to go to the sink and clean these parts and my greasy hands, and we'll be back just like that. Okay, just a little more minor cleaning to do here after thorough scrubbing in the sink. Checking all these gears for missing teeth and wear. That one looks good, that one's fine. This one, I know, is going to have some grease still down in these gear teeth. And before I forget, I'm going to pull up this pinion gear. Oh boy, there's still some grease in there. And I'm going to put some oil on that and work that in so that button moves nice and smoothly. So I pulled that up, in case that got out of the picture. I pulled that up, cleaned it up, put a little bit of oil in there and worked that in. And this is a good time to, on your various shafts, to take some steel wool and make sure those are nice and clean and free of all dried grease residue. And the handle needs it pretty badly. Because I am going to be switching this handle out, putting this on my grandpa's, the reel that we want to make the best out of the two. Okay, so I think we'll start by greasing that anti-reverse pawl, or oiling I should say. Now it's working much more smoothly, no effort at all to move that now. But this anti-reverse was not working when I before I started on this reel, so something was goofy in there. Now it's working just fine. Now the anti-reverse is working just fine. Well, one of the things I'm going to do is, let's see here. So there's no clicking when I move that forward, so I'm okay with that. I was thinking about greasing that anti-reverse gear, because sometimes when that pawl rides on there, it makes an annoying noise. But I'm going to go ahead and, I'm going to put, let's see here. I guess I'll take off this one off my grandpa's and replace it with the one from the donor reel, because this one's pretty boogered up. Now see, that one makes a clicking sound. I don't like that. So I may have done something wrong in that one, or it's slightly different. We'll have to wait and see. You gotta have this little washer concave side out, and then we can put our star drag on. There we go. I have a half notion to bend that out a little bit. There wasn't much concavity to it. And stick that on there, and then the nut. Which I don't think is a standard nut. I think it might be a replacement, but I'm not absolutely 100% sure. But it doesn't match ones I've seen, pictures of others I've seen, or mine. Alright, now time to grease the main gear. And I hope I remembered to oil that main gear shaft. If I did, not too big of a deal, because this is basically going to be a parts reel anyway. But just remember, if I didn't, to go ahead and oil that crank shaft before you put that in there. Alright, now we should be ready to try to winkle this thing back in there. And this one we will remember to oil. And then grease the pinion gear. Some people like to grease up here on the spring. I guess it's okay. I guess the spring has to slide up on there, so I guess it doesn't hurt anything. I don't like to over grease things. Okay, and let's get the thumb piece. bend that a little bit to make it fit on there tight so I don't keep falling off. And bend this down so it doesn't interfere when I try to put it back on. And now we're ready for the side plate. For now I'm going to put the, let's see, maybe we will go ahead and find out which screws are boogered up here. So I'm going to take that boogered up one out, and that boogered up one out, and put these new, nicer new ones back into my grandpa's reel, the one we're trying to improve, and put the crappy ones back into the parts reel. And then a bit of oil around the shaft here for the spool, or grease I should say. And that little tab fits into that little notch there. And then we've got our spinner head and that little, now I didn't put my little spring in there, so that spring has to go in right there, and that's what pops the, keeps the that's what keeps the spinner head and allows it to pop up. Just trying to figure out why that's keyed and the shaft on there isn't. I'll pull mine apart and see if it's a similar situation on this one. Yeah, that is odd. The shaft on this one isn't keyed either. Maybe it's a case of exchanging or using different part or same parts for different reels. I don't know what's going on there. So our little lock washer deal. And that. So that one works really nice, but because I stole the part, this little spring out of it, it's not gonna, the spinner head isn't gonna stick out. Your thumb button's not gonna catch and release. But it sure works nice now, and presumably the drag works and so on. I mean, you can tighten that up and then you can hardly turn it. So the drag's working fine. In fact, and of course, what this really needs is that little insert there. So it needs that, and then it needs that little spring, and I'm not sure it's worth trying to sacrifice another reel to get this one going, and so on and so forth. So this will probably just remain a parts reel. Well, now let's get into this one and see why it clicks, which I don't want it to do unless it was meant to be that way, but based on the other one, I don't know that it is. Okay, so this is the crank assembly on my grandpa's reel, and this is the one on the donor reel. And if you look at this spring, the donor reel was the one that wasn't clicking so bad, and our reverse was working fine but wasn't clicking so bad. This one's bent, and so I'm probably just going to switch out the springs, but if I didn't have a spring to switch out, I'd straighten that one out, and then it's not going to be so tight on that pawl or dog on that anti-reverse, and it's not going to make so much noise. Okay, so I got the crank shaft switched out, put the one from the parts reel onto my grandpa's, and it turns out the nut's all boogered up too. So I'm going to use the nut off of the parts reel. Even it's a great, it's a totally suitable nut, threaded properly and everything. I'm just not sure that's an original nut. I think the original ones were more bell-shaped like that. That one fits on real nice. Now notice, with that spring loosened up, straightened out, no sound when you wind, but the anti-reverse works just fine. That's really what I wanted to fix on this reel. And now we've got the issue with the threads being boogered up and the nut being boogered up taken care of. So now we're in business. Now we need to get in the part that led to all this little spring that holds the spinner head up. And I'm going to go ahead and, I think, take off this spool to do this, because there's I don't know if you can see, but there's a flat end in that notch there. You see that? Towards the top of that, you can see through all the way to the towel. On the other side, you can't. That's where the flat side of this spring goes. So that flat side is going to end up over there. Like that. Then we can put our spool back on, set that tab in that notch. Oh, my lock washer's already stuck on there. And then we can put our retainer nut back on and tighten that down. And put the cover back on, and this reel is working like new again, just like when Grandpa used it. So that is a Shakespeare push button Wondercast number 1771. First one of this model was made in 1969, and stole some parts from a parts reel and made Grandpa's reel like new again. Okay, thanks for watching.